The morning sun had barely risen over the glass towers of Ilaritech Industries when an unusual stillness fell over the CEO's top-floor office. Mira Ellington, a woman known across the city for her unbreakable discipline and razor-sharp leadership, stood motionless by the panoramic window, staring down at the courtyard below. Her attention wasn't on financial projections or acquisition reports. It was fixed on a man most people never noticed. A man pushing a worn cart with a crooked wheel. A man who walked with quiet purpose even though his back carried the weight of a world no one else could see. His name was Arian Cole, the company's least visible employee and overnight janitor whose existence flickered at the edge of everyone's peripheral vision. But for Mira, something about him had always felt like an unfinished question. And that morning, as shafts of daylight illuminated the tired slump of his shoulders, she felt an intuitive pull so strong it unsettled her. Something whispered that behind his silent routine lived a story more powerful than any corporate success she had achieved. If you believe kindness and second chances can change a life, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Acts of Light. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. Arian had always tried to blend into the corners of hallways, keeping his eyes on the floors he polished rather than the people who walked across them. His uniform was always clean but faded, and his badge hung from a frayed strap as though it had survived more than one difficult year. No one knew that after finishing his shift at 7 a.m., he rarely went home to rest. Instead, he rushed to a small rented room where his son waited, a boy named Rowan whose smile was as bright as sunlight, though life had tried hard to dim it. Rowan had been diagnosed with a degenerative spine condition that limited his mobility, and Arian's every waking moment revolved around keeping him safe, hopeful, and alive. But no one at Ilaritech knew about Rowan. Arian was terrified that if they learned he sometimes left work exhausted beyond safety limits, or that he occasionally swapped shifts illegally just to make Rowan's medical appointments, he'd lose the one job that kept them afloat. Mira didn't know this yet. But she sensed something, an invisible fracture in the way he moved. That morning, as she watched Arian push his cart toward the employee exit, her curiosity tipped into certainty. She needed to understand his story. It wasn't corporate curiosity. It was human concern, something she usually kept sealed behind a CEO's armor. She slipped out of her office, exchanged her heels for flats, and followed him through the silent lower halls. The scent of citrus cleaning solution lingered behind him like a trail, and the loose wheel on his cart clicked faintly with every turn. Mira kept her distance and moved quietly, almost embarrassed by what she was doing, yet unable to stop. When Arian stepped outside into the brightness of late morning, Mira felt her heartbeat accelerate. She saw him glance around nervously, as though the world outside the company was far more dangerous than anything within it. Then he hurried toward the old bus stop across the street. She followed discreetly, staying 3 seats behind him when the bus arrived. The bus rattled through the neighborhoods like an aging animal, passing sleek complexes until it reached the outskirts where metal shops and wilted markets lined the streets. She expected him to get off near a residential area, but instead he exited close to an aging community center with peeling paint and a sign that read Hopeline Rehabilitation and Mobility Clinic. Her stomach tightened with a sudden, uneasy understanding. She watched him rush inside the building with the urgency of a man running toward a heartbeat. She waited 2 minutes, just long enough to ensure she wouldn't draw attention, and followed. Inside, sunlight filtered through dusty windows onto a row of simple therapy mats. A group of children sat scattered around, some in wheelchairs, some with braces on their legs, others lying on cushioned tables. Occupational therapists moved gently among them, encouraging, guiding, adjusting. And in the center of the room, Arian knelt beside a little boy no older than 7, tightening the straps of a spinal brace with hands that shook from exhaustion but never from reluctance. Rowan's face instantly revealed everything. Bright eyes full of resilience. A fragile frame wrapped in medical support gear. A trust in his father so complete it made Mira swallow hard. She watched Arian lift him carefully, positioning his small feet on a parallel bar so he could attempt to stand. The boy gritted his teeth, determined, and Arian whispered encouragements with such tenderness that Mira felt herself freeze. She saw the secrecy behind his fatigue, the reason his uniform always seemed one size too big, the reason he never spoke beyond a respectful greeting. He wasn't just tired. He was carrying another life on his shoulders. Minutes passed as she watched Rowan take trembling steps, supported by his father's hands. Each tiny movement was a victory, each grimace a war cry. And then she saw something no boardroom presentation had ever shown her: raw devotion. The kind that changed destinies. When Rowan stumbled, Arian caught him instantly, pulling him close and pressing his forehead to his son's. For a moment, the world outside that clinic dissolved. It was just a father and a boy fighting the universe together. Myra's throat tightened. She had spent years building an empire, acquiring companies, optimizing workflows, perfecting systems, but she had almost forgotten what real courage looked like. It was here, in this aging clinic, in the hands of a man making miracles out of broken odds. Arian never noticed her standing there. Not even when she stepped back out the door, wiping her eyes before anyone could see. She followed him again later that day when he left the clinic, this time with Rowan in his arms. He carried the boy with the soft protectiveness of someone who feared each step might cause pain. Mira watched them walk through narrow streets to a small, dim apartment complex where laundry hung from balconies like tired flags. She stood at a distance as Arian opened the door, revealing a room barely large enough for a bed and a foldable table. Inside were medical forms stacked in binders, crumpled receipts from pharmacies, and a single window where sunlight tried its best to enter. She didn't go closer. She didn't need to. Everything she had come searching for had already found her. For 3 days she said nothing. She returned to her office, chaired meetings, responded to emails, and maintained the flawless composure expected of her. But something inside her had shifted, a quiet earthquake that changed the shape of her priorities. She began reviewing the company's internal salary structures. She looked into health assistance programs. She studied night shift policies. All the while, she replayed that scene of Arian steadying Rowan's trembling feet. By the 4th day, she called HR for a confidential evaluation of janitorial wages and support benefits. They listed data, numbers, protocols. Mira barely heard them. She was listening only to the ache in her memory, the ache she had felt inside that clinic. The following week, she arranged a visit to the custodial wing. She rarely went down there, not out of pride but because time rarely allowed it. But that day, she walked with purpose. When she saw Arian emptying a waste bin, his movements slow and methodical, she approached him gently. He startled slightly, as though convinced that any attention from someone in her position could only mean trouble. She asked him to come to her office after his shift. His fear was immediate, though he masked it with humble compliance. When he stepped into the top-floor office later that evening, Mira motioned for him to sit. His hands trembled. She could tell he was expecting termination. He clutched the brim of his cap, preparing for the blow. Instead, she leaned forward and spoke with a softness rarely heard from her. She told him she had followed him not out of suspicion, but concern. She told him about the clinic, the apartment, the steps she had witnessed Rowan take. She apologized for invading his privacy, but she also said something else, something that made Arian's eyes widen with disbelief. She told him he was not invisible. Not anymore. In one long breath, she presented the decisions she had made. A full salary upgrade. A comprehensive medical support package for Rowan. Flexible work hours. Sponsored mobility therapy. A private transport allowance. And a promotion to facility supervisor so he would never again feel like a ghost walking the hallways. Arian broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But with a slow collapse of his shoulders as though someone had finally lifted the stone he had carried for years. Tears slid down his cheeks, dripping onto the cap he held so tightly. He tried to speak, but emotions stole his breath. Mira allowed him the silence he needed. When he finally managed to stand, his gratitude filled the entire room without a single word spoken. The transformation of his life happened gradually, like sunrise seeping into a dark room. Rowan received better treatment, new braces, and eventually a mobility device that allowed him to move more freely. Arian's shifts became manageable. His exhaustion softened into a gentle tiredness rather than a crushing one. He walked taller, spoke more confidently, and sometimes Mira saw him chatting with colleagues he used to avoid. The building felt warmer because of him. Months later, Ilaritech held its annual employee appreciation event. On a bright afternoon under a sky painted with streaks of gold, all